how much do you care about like building to sell?
I don't want to sell. I much prefer the idea of building cash generating machines, you know,
Rather than a big sort of like 5x revenue exit or something like
yeah,
that.
I mean, if you think about it, okay, I sell my company for $20 million, okay, 50% goes to Uncle Sam, so I got 10 million, you know, and then I put that in what, like a 5%
Yeah, the
account,
S&P or something.
and then I make like, you know, what is that, 400K a year or something? Like that's actually a lot less than I make.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have 10 million bucks, but my lifestyle is actually less than what I have now.
Yeah.
So why would I want to sell?
Nice.
Same argument, by the way, I make for book deals. Like why take the advance when you know the publisher is going to make, or they're going to try to make 10 times that on your book? Maybe a different path is just self-publishing the book, and you don't get a lump sum up front, but you might generate more in royalties over a longer time horizon.
What do you think I should do for my next book?
I'm so glad you asked this. So I've been wanting to talk to you about this. So first of all, I'm like halfway through your book. I want to pay you a compliment. And I feel like this is going to come off as a backhanded compliment, but I don't mean it that way. It is way better written than I thought it was going to be. And not that I like thought you were a bad writer or anything, but very often I will read self-help books and it's just like really, it's like very mindless, you know? I am not finding your book to be mindless at all.
Oh, thanks.
It's really cool. And I like the combination of research and personal story. And I also think the categorical difference of grinding productivity versus feel-good productivity, like how you set that up in the beginning, very smart.
Oh, thank you.
Very smart. So one of my questions was actually, what was your book deal? And was it a one book deal? Was it a multiple book deal?
Yeah, it was one book deal with Penguin having the right of first refusal on future deals.
For life?
I
Do you
think
know for how
so.
long?
But it just means that if I do go try to publish it, I have to give them the option to buy it first.
How long is that clause in effect for? Do you know? Like if you do that once and they take it, do you have to give them first right of refusal for all the books after that?
I'm not sure. I should look at the contract.
That's an important piece to know.
But I think I can choose to self-publish the next one if I wanted to.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have to give them the option of buying it, but I don't have to accept their offer.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
then that's fine.
It just means that if Penguin versus, I don't know, Simon & Schuster were bidding, then
Oh, then
Penguin
they
would
get-
have the right to dibs on it.
Oh, got
essentially.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I give you my perspective, what do you think you should do? And like, how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so this is going to be very inside baseball. So if anyone feels like leaving the podcast at this point, by all means, please do. I am not sure. So thinking out loud.
By the way,
Yeah.
I feel like this is what I wanted to talk to you about
Yeah, nice.
for mine. So we'll just keep it going.
Great, perfect. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure. So obviously there's value in traditional publishing. In my case, the goal was to have an asset that was to be seen as like a legit guy rather than quote just a YouTuber and all that, all of that stuff.
I think you accomplished that big time.
Yeah, so the prestige, the New York Times list, the Sunday Times list, the fact that it's traditionally published with Penguin, blah blah blah.
Congrats on New York Times, by the way. I haven't said that
Oh, yeah, we've not seen
here,
each other in
but
a while, yeah.
but congrats.
Thank you very much. So all of that stuff is done. And now for future books, I know I want to write future books. And I also quite liked the fact that I had an editor who was nice. They had like the in-house Penguin designer made the front cover. I hired an external designer to make 50 variations, and we couldn't find anything better than the cover, and the cover turns out to be really nice.
It's a great cover.
Thanks. Penguin landed us like 36 different language translation deals. It's in bookstores. People are sending me pictures from like freaking Taiwan, from like a random bookstore in Austin. All over the world, people are sending pictures of this book in different translations, and I hear that sort of stuff doesn't really happen if you're self-published, unless you become like a David Goggins or something like that, which just seems unlikely. So there's part of me that's like, I like the freedom that Paul Millard has, making like $400,000 already from his book sales of The Pathless Path. I like the idea of doing like smaller books. Like I really want to do a book around like, I don't want to say the title because like normally I'm not protective of ideas, but when it comes to book titles, I'm pretty protective of ideas. But I want to do a series of books and feel like I have more freedom and that the stakes are lower. But also I like the idea that there's a big publisher behind it who then is doing the publisher machinery to get it into different languages and into different bookstores around the world, which is just kind of cool.
So just to summarize, what do you feel like the publisher did that you wouldn't be able to do specifically?
Good point.
The translation deal. I would say the bulk translation deal. Because fun fact, by the way, right now I am negotiating the Korean rights for Art and Business of Online Writing, which is self-published. So you can do translation deals. Yeah. It's just they're emailing you. They're not emailing the publishing house.
A handful of people have emailed us being like, "Hey, do you have a Slovakian deal?" And I'm like, "Do we have a Slovakian? Yep, turns out we do. Sorry."
Right.
That kind of thing.
So it's possible, and that you can do that. But doing a bulk deal, like they go out and sell it in 36 languages, that's something that a publisher does that an individual typically cannot. Okay, so that's one.
Yeah.
But like, what else do you feel like they did?
The translation thing and the bookstores. Okay,
so do you know the data of how many copies were bought online versus in store?
Yeah, that's a good point. No, but just looking at what we already have, it's like 90-10 Amazon versus everything else.
Okay, so...
And everything else also, like Barnes & Noble, it's unclear as to whether it was bricks and mortar or online sale.
Yeah.
So a big chunk of those were probably online as well.
The mega trend in books is that it's funny because everyone, whenever they talk about book deals, is like, I want to get into bookstores, but the trend line is that books bought in stores is going down and books bought online is going up.
Yeah.
Something else that I have found a lot of people don't know is you talked about, the designer in-house creating this amazing cover and you work with an editor. You can hire all those people.
Yeah. So we did hire an external editor and we also hired an external designer.
Yeah. So even the people in those houses want to freelance on the side, or they used to work in a big 5 house and now they freelance on the side. So also this argument of like taking a book deal and you get access to these specialized people, it's not true. You can get access to them just reaching out to them and going, do you want to freelance? So, and then another thing was I read the whole analysis that your team did of the marketing.
Yeah.
Which was fascinating. That was really cool that you did that. Do you care if I share some of those numbers?
No, by all means. Yeah.
So one of the things I was shocked that you only spent like $25,000 on marketing. I know that's not counting labor costs, but that was like the Zoom and some paid newsletters and stuff.
It was very minimal marketing spend.
Okay, so like $25,000 to generate the outcome that you did. And that probably isn't really what moved the needle. What moved the needle is your organic audience by far, right? Yeah. And what did the publisher do?
They landed a few things, like we got Good Morning America because of the publisher. We got like the Today Show Australia because of the publisher. We got a few, like we got the Financial Times piece, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So status symbols. Yeah. But which by the way, the thing is, I have probably spent 3,000 hours reading about traditional publishing. Contracts, I've read the nerdiest books on like the history of publishing, how it's evolved. Like something that I've really wanted as a writer is to be as educated as possible about what is happening in this industry. How do deals get structured? What are the incentive structures, right? What are the benefits of taking a traditional publisher versus self-publishing? All these things. And so when you really like list them out, the publisher really isn't doing that much. What they're doing is they are giving you the ability to play the New York Times game. That's it. If I go sell 1 million copies tomorrow, but I'm not with a publishing house, New York Times doesn't care, right? So Ponzi scheme, like they give you access to the game, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In literature, also, you can't win awards. So you can't really win the Pulitzer Prize, Nobel Prize, or anything unless you're with Big Five, right? Gatekeeper. Okay. So you can't play that game. Bookstores. So a lot of people don't know how bookstores work as businesses, but basically what a bookstore is trying to figure out is they have inventory and they're like, well, what books should we carry? Now, just because you accept a book deal doesn't mean that they're going to get you in every bookstore, right? Because how many books does a bookstore hold?
Yeah, like small numbers,
like
in the grand scheme of things.
300?
Yeah, whenever I walk into a bookstore, I'm like, is my book there? And the answer is usually no. Like, I've never seen it in a bookstore.
Okay, so there's the irony in that.
I've seen Instagram stories of people who've seen it in bookstores.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're not going to get you in every bookstore, right? And the bookstores that they get you in, what happens, it's almost like an old school algorithm. So what they do is they pick these markets and they go, okay, we're going to target these couple bookstores in this localized area. And they have a rep from their house that goes to the bookstore and goes, hey, here's the deal. Ali Abdaal, I'm sure you don't know who this person is, but we just signed this huge book deal with him. He has 5 million YouTube subscribers. So he's going to push the shit out of this thing, right? And they're basically selling to the bookstore your ability to market to bring people to the bookstore. And that is how the bookstore decides, well, what books should we carry, right? So already, if you're an author, you're like, okay, how much leverage do I have? And even if I sign a book deal, the publisher's not putting me in every bookstore. So how much leverage do I have that the publisher can go market to the bookstore saying this author is going to drive in-person sales, right? So all of these variables work together. So when you start listing all these things out, if you were to just be really brutally honest, like who got you New York Times? Was it you or was it the publisher?
The publisher unlocked the ability to be on the list, but it was really our audience that drove the sales to get on the list.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So then you start doing the math. So, okay, you got the status symbol. Once a New York Times bestseller, always a New York Times bestseller. So you don't need to play that game anymore, right?
I don't think there's much value in being a 2 times New York Times.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, who
5
cares?
times, or like Tim Ferriss' thing or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. So now you start doing the math on a self-published book. And you go, okay, what's the difference between, we'll just use round numbers. What's the difference between $1 million advance and a 10% royalty versus $0 advance, but 100% royalty, right? And if you start like, okay, so how many copies? You've sold 200,000.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just be super generous and go 100,000 of those are from in bookstores, which the publisher did for you, right? Yeah. So we'll say you're responsible for driving 100K copies. And you sell your next book for $10 as an ebook, $20 in print. And again, just we'll use round numbers. $10 is the net, and you sell a lot of them through your own website, and some through Amazon, where like the split is 60-40, whatever. You've already made your $1 million.
Yeah,
100,000 copies, $10 a copy.
Yeah,
you've already made $1 million, and that's in the first year. So what happens then? Year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, and like nobody does the napkin math, but it almost doesn't matter how big the advance is. Is that when you take into account the higher royalty, and if you're someone who has an audience and continues pushing it, right? You go from marketing the book that you don't really own, you own 10% of it, to marketing your library that you have majority or all ownership over, and the royalties start outpacing the advance.
Yeah. And the advance you have to pay off anyway through the royalties, so it's not even free money. It's just,
Yeah. Most authors, even if they get $1 million advance, they don't ever see a royalty from their book. So they just went, I'm going to take the $1 million up front. And sometimes that's the right decision. But if you just want to write one book, if you were like, I'm one and done, you made the right decision. You won the status game, probably got a really nice advance, you're good, right? But if you actually enjoy writing and you want to build a library, well, you should own the majority of your library. I love when people are like, nobody buys books. Like, okay, how do you think all the publishers make billions of dollars? People buy books. It's just the publishers convince writers that there's no money in books, which is why the writers all go, sure, you want to take 90% of my product? No problem. And then they just slowly accumulate a library over the years and over the decades.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so it sounds like you think self-publish is the way to go.
I think from both a content and a digital product perspective, we'll just take a different lens.
Yeah.
If you ran an experiment, a public experiment, and said, here's all the math on my traditional book, and then I do it again, and you put forth the same resources, but you do it all yourself, and then you do a post-mortem, here are the differences. First of all, I think from a content perspective, that would crush. Second, it would teach you a ton. And third of all, you could probably bundle all of that into a digital product that monetizes it again, being like, I'm going to walk you through my whole publishing process.
I also like the fact that if you're self-published, you can give away books.
Yeah, you can do a lot. So Dickie and I got offered a book deal like a year ago or something, and the contract was nuts. I was like, I can't believe you think people sign stuff like this. Like, it was so predatory. And they were like, this is standard language. Like, I don't understand what you have a problem with. And I was like, you want lifetime representation of everything that I write forever? They were like, yeah, most writers have no problem with that. I'm like, get out of here. And so Yeah, I think that in the long run, because you have anyone who is building an audience, I would really stress test the value of taking the money up front versus extending the time horizon and going, you're a creative person. You're going to want to create things for the next 50 years. So what does it look like when you own your library for 50 years?
Yeah, I wasn't even vaguely thinking of like the money up. Like initially, what I said to the publisher was, "Oh, I don't want an advance. I just care about the royalties because I don't need the cash flow." And they were like, "Great, perfect." And then I was told, actually, that's a bad idea because if there's a big advance on their P&L, then they're going to put more effort into marketing the book kind of thing. And so the money up front was really more of a, at least they've got some skin in the game kind of idea.
Yeah, so another flaw of traditional publishing, right, is that forces them to actually be incentivized. If they, part of the reason why so many writers vent about their publishing deals is because the publisher goes, well, we don't really believe in the book, but hey, you're willing to sell us 90% of it, so we'll give you a 10 grand advance. But when they do that, they have no incentive to actually go push it. Yeah. So the only reason that you are taking the big advance is to basically put their nose to the grindstone, being like, now you have to push it.
Yeah. Interesting.
You want to talk? I would love to ask you some questions about writing the book, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so first of all, productivity and self-help is one of those things where it's hard to reinvent because it's like, how many times can you talk about the same thing, you know? Which is why I think I like going into the book, I was sort of like, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see, you know? And I was really pleasantly surprised. How did you come up with this lens of feel-good productivity? And you reference a lot of studies in it. Were those studies that you had read and then that is what gave you the idea? Or did you sort of start with the idea and then you went and found research that supported it?
Yeah. Okay, so the backstory is that initially the book was titled The Productivity Equation, which was modeled off of a Skillshare class that I did that was about productivity equals meaning multiplied by output multiplied by fun or something like that. And I always had this fun construct within whatever I would teach about productivity on YouTube and stuff. And initially when publisher A approached me, they were like, we'll just give you a book deal, sight unseen, you don't even need a proposal, just like sign the book deal kind of thing. I took ages to sign the papers, and just before I was signing them, when they were sort of hassling me about it, I spoke to a writer friend who said, you know, who's your agent? And I was like, I don't have an agent. And she was like, you need to, don't sign this thing, talk to an agent. I talked to an agent, blah, 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 blah. Then we sort of renegotiated that deal with publisher A, and then it came to writing a proper proposal for US publishers, because apparently US publishers don't like books where they're not at least jointly publishing it at the same time, because if the US publisher is playing second fiddle to the UK publisher, then they don't like it, or something to that effect. So then we had to write a proper proposal for the US publishers. And so I wrote the productivity equation and sent it to a couple of editors. And basically the feedback was that this is terrible and it's not going to sell, because no one wants to read a book called The Productivity Equation. It just sounds boring as fuck, was the idea. And there was this guy, David Moldauer, who was super helpful. He's the guy who also did James Clear's proposal and also has worked with a bunch of our other friends in that WhatsApp group. He basically said, yep, it stinks. But come on, man. Like, if you had to boil it down to one thing, you know, you're successful, you're a doctor, you're a YouTuber. Like, what's the one thing? And I was like, I just find a way to make everything fun. And he was like, that's the book. That's a cool concept. And he was like, I don't think anyone's gone into productivity from that angle. So, like, why not just do that? And initially, it was like, okay, well, maybe that's a thing. And then it became the productivity game, and it became all about gamification and stuff. And as I was... initially, I made the mistake of outsourcing the research. So I got a research assistant who was kind of reading a bunch of papers and stuff and feeding me insights. And I'd sort of come up with this framework around like, okay, well, what do video game designers do? Like, why is WoW addictive? And how do we apply that to productivity, blah, blah, blah. And then I started writing and realizing I didn't quite have the material, and I couldn't really make the case that, like, fun was the thing. And then I started reading the papers myself. And then I was like, oh, okay, the guy who I hired had an English background. He didn't have a science background. So he's trying to read all these, like, psychology studies. He probably didn't even know how to actually access them because of, like, the logins and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the journals.
So when I started getting into the journals myself, that was when I sort of went on a bit of a rabbit trail to see, like, what is the evidence that, like, is there evidence backing up this sort of fun idea? Because there was the Happiness Advantage by Sean Acker, like, which is the idea that, you know, success comes from happiness rather than the other way around. It's not that happiness leads to success, it's that success... No, it's not that success leads to happiness. It's that happiness leads to success. So I knew there was some stuff there. So I sort of followed up his thingies, and eventually came on this broaden and build theory that I talked about in the introduction.
Yeah, I
that
remember.
Positive emotions are like the thing that like runs this upward spiral of productivity and positivity and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, this is it. Finally, there is like a thing that I can hang my hat on to be like, there is evidence that positive emotions drive productivity, which is not quite the same as fun. And so then it became a bit of like a balancing act to be like, okay, how much do we lean into the language of fun, or how much do we lean into the language of positive emotions? And eventually the positive emotions thing made sense. And then in the shower one day, I was thinking, positive emotion productivity, positive productivity, it sounds a bit shit. Good vibes productivity. Well, there's a book called Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King, so I can't do that. What's another word for good vibes? Oh, feel good productive, feel good productive. Oh, shit, like,
It's got a bop to it.
Feel good productivity. That I hopped on, made a loom to send to my agent and editor and team to be like, guys, I think I've got a title. I think it's Feel Good Productivity. What do you think? And everyone was like, yeah, that's like the first of the 5,000 titles we've tested so far. That feels as if it lands. And so it was like that kind of idea.
Fascinating. Yeah, I remember there was a, I forget where in the book it is. It's like somewhere early on where you are referencing, you're making the case for this, and then you're referencing all the different studies or different books that you were reading, and each sentence that you had pulled referenced a researcher talking about play in their work, and every sentence had the word play or playful in it. And that's where I started to really be like, oh, okay, I understand how this is all being connected together. And it's cool because I think with things like self-help, just broadly, a lot of the secret to positioning or differentiation is finding that through line in lots of different things and pulling it together. And I feel like this through line was, I keep pointing over here because you have a copy of it on your bookshelf and I keep looking at it, is that was a really interesting through line to find. And I feel like it all seems to, it's how it always is, right? It's like, it seems to make so much sense now. It doesn't seem like it made a ton of sense in the beginning.
Yeah.
How much did you discover this either through just writing and reading and exploration, or were you an outliner? Did you like have an idea, start with an outline, refine the outline? What was that process like?
Yeah. You know, I think the first half of the book has a strong through line. The second half doesn't really, because the title "Feel Good Productivity" only came about like 2.5 years into the process, and so it was always going to be play, power, and people. Like those were always the chapters in part one. But initially, because I started with an outline, and it was like part one was about energizing, and part two was about procrastination, part three was around like burnout and stuff. I think we managed to make it with that through line, but if I had my time again and another 5 years and I knew the title of the book was going to be Feel Good Productivity, it would have had a way stronger through line because I'm sure I could have found like a lot of really good stuff that really pushed that message. But because the title sort of came towards the end of the process, then it was a case of trying to almost retrofit what we already had, knowing that like, okay, well, there's all this stuff around burnout. There's all this stuff around like procrastination and emotions and stuff. And like, I guess we can do a little bit of literary sleight of hand and saying that like, you know, feeling bad makes you procrastinate, so feeling good makes you productive. And it's like, it's not quite that simple, but with a bit of hand waving and a little bit of like shoehorning in a block quote or something that like a pull quote that really emphasizes the feel good angle, maybe it can work.
Yeah.
And so it felt a little unsatisfying once that title, it's like, trying to come up with the title of a YouTube video once you've made the video. It's like, it's always way harder than starting with the title. And so, yeah, I don't know what your original question was.
So,
but like,
okay, so on that's one of the biggest things that we teach in all our writing programs too, is like, if you start with the title is what dictates all of the content.
Yes.
But if you start with the content and try and retrofit the title, it's impossible.
What a fucking nightmare, yeah.
So actually, it's interesting then, the next book you write, it's like, you should spend a disproportionate amount of time on the title.
100%.
Because that's what thinks through the whole book.
I tell every author I know this now. Whenever someone's like, yeah, I'm 2 years into the process and we're still thinking about the title, I'm like,
no.
I can feel the pain, and they're all like, yep, I know.
Yeah, because literally the title or the subtitle completely changes so many, the stories you tell, the research you pull, the advice you give, everything.
I would have had no idea about this had I not been through the process.
Yeah.
Because if someone had told me this 3 years ago that, oh yeah, you should really think of the title first, I listened to the publisher where they were like, oh, in like 80% of cases the title comes later and stuff. I was like, okay, yeah.
Okay, so this is another thing. I've learned that publishers they don't really have a framework for books. They sort of do. Like, I can tell that they all think that the key to self-help is go as broad as possible. And the challenge of going broad is that it becomes less and less tangible and less specific. And so what happens is you have a lot of these self-help books that come out with nothing to hold on to.
Yep.
So they'll be titled like Limitless.
Yeah.
Whoever's book is named Limitless is named at you, right? So it'll be Limitless, and the subtitle will be like Becoming Your Best Self.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't know what I'm signing up for. Your book actually, and I think it often happens on accident. I don't want to take away from what you did, but I think it often happens on accident where your book title is actually, I've been formulating this framework around like the perfect book title. Like, what is the perfect book title?
Yep.
Your main title is actually a category of productivity.
Yep.
So as much as possible, you actually want to define a categorical difference,
Yes.
right?
So like slow productivity, Cal Newport.
Exactly.
He's defining a category.
Exactly.
He's not trying to be productivity. He's trying to be slow productivity.
Exactly. Yeah. And so on accident or on purpose, you did that, which is literally 90% of the game, because people that read the book title then go, I intuitively understand this isn't about all productivity. And I've already seen there's a book on slow productivity. So different niche or subcategory, what is feel-good productivity? So you're being specific, but it's also really broad. Like everyone wants to be productive and everyone wants to feel good.
Yeah.
So one of the keys that I've found to book titles is how can you make something both specific and broad at the same time? Feel-good productivity accomplishes that. Then the subtitle has to tell you what you're going to get, right? And so the subtitle, it's like how to do
more of what matters to you.
How to do more of what matters to you, right? Okay, so it actually is accomplishing that. So you see feel-good productivity and you go, oh, this is a how-to book. So we accomplished that, right? And then it's like, well, what does the person want to learn how to do? They want to learn how to do what matters to them, right? If you don't have those two pieces, if you don't have the category differentiator multiplied by, and what are you actually telling me?
Yeah.
There's a reason why those books don't move, And so now your job, when you go do this on your own the next time, is like, how do you take that general framework and go, now let me apply it to something different?
Yep.
And then spend like a year just doing nothing but workshopping the title and the subtitle.
I agree. I completely agree. Do you think I should lean into being the productivity guy? I think in Snow Leopard you talk about this, the whole Ryan Holiday equals stoicism kind of thing. And if you ask people what's the word that you would associate with Ali Abdaal, that word is productivity. That's a really good word. It's a really high value word to be associated with my name. And so do I want to go, I don't know, feel good fitness, feel good relationships, feel good spirituality, feel good parenting? Or do I want to go productive relationships, productive parenting, that sort of idea?
Okay, so this is an awesome question. This is going to be very advanced. So anyone who's listening, we're just going to skip straight to level 80, okay? All right, so first of all, I think it's funny, this growing trend. You see it on Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, where everyone's like, I am the broad category guy.
Yeah, the writing guy.
The writing guy, the productivity guy, right? Yeah. Okay, the thing that everyone needs to internalize is that when you're thinking categorically, the goal, you are not what's important. Like the goal is actually not, how do I grow the category of I'm the productivity guy? The goal is, how do I grow the category itself and I am part of it?
Fine, like Ryan Holiday grew stoicism.
Right, so he doesn't go, I'm the stoicism guy. He goes, I'm going to evangelize stoicism. And because I am doing that more than anyone, you associate me with that category,
okay,
right?
Fine, yeah.
So every person who does the guy thing, I'm like, you already misunderstood the idea, right? Second of all is, your book title, you stumbled upon something, which is, it's not all productivity, it's feel-good productivity, right? So if I were you, your mega category is not productivity. You're not the productivity guy, it's feel-good productivity. Then the question is, okay, so you own that now. Yeah. You've planted your flag. Now what are all the subcategories of feel-good productivity? So what are all the other things that can go within that umbrella?
Feel good productivity for parents. Feel good productivity for writers, feel good productivity for students.
So you can go the for who
the miracle morning for
exactly.
dot, dot, dot. Yeah.
So for left-handed dogs. Yeah. So you can niche down within that category by audience.
Yeah.
You could niche down by outcome. You could niche down by problem. You could niche down in all sorts of different ways.
What do you mean by problem or by?
So I think that the mistake would be, well, I actually think you could go multiple different ways. Typically, it's very hard. So there's an old book called Positioning. You ever read that book, Positioning?
I've read it ages ago, but I need to read it by Al Rice.
Al Reese and Jack Trout. Yeah. And they have this concept called line extension or brand extension, right? Which is, Google becomes known for search, and then they go and take the Google brand and they bring it over to social, call it Google Plus, and it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because typically you can't just take a brand and then extend it into other categories, right? So I think the mistake would be you thinking, well, I'm Ali Abdaal and I've been successful in productivity. Now let me just go jump to a different mega category and
like
just think I'll be
yeah.
Right. You can sort of make the argument though that it's not fully line extension if you're extending not the brand Ali Abdaal, but you're extending the category so of feel good productivity.
Sure.
And that's where you could go feel good relationships, feel good fitness, whatever.
Sure.
But what I would think about first is what are the categories that are most closely related to productivity? Like relationships isn't the closest next category. So what are some other?
I mean, motivation would be one. I mean, I guess how do you define category?
Time management.
Time management.
Like that's like a subset of productivity is so wide. So you're sort of going what are the largest subcategories within productivity?
Sure. Yeah. Time management would be a big one. Procrastination, motivation, definitely. Increasingly discipline is a lot of.
So
sort of thing.
For example, feel good discipline. That's interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And that is a one deviation away. And you're not,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm full of them. And so that's not you going, I'm Ali Abdaal, I can be successful at anything. Yeah. That's you taking your already successful flag in the ground and going, I'm just going to extend it to this little territory that's right next to me.
Yeah. Feel Good Discipline would be an interesting book to write.
And so that's
it almost writes itself.
Exactly.
Just based on that title.
It writes itself, and something that I always look for, especially with book titles, is how do you take two words that shouldn't be in the same room and put them in the same room?
Yes.
And feel good and discipline usually are not put together. Yep. So inevitably, you just created some magic where the person's like...
Feel good in relationships, that's so vanilla.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're looking for that dissonance.
Nice. Oh, that's good. Anything else? Feel good.
Yeah, I think just to crystallize it though, if I were you, especially because of how successful this book has been, and I sort of seen how you've adjusted some of your branding to sort of be all cohesive with this book and the book title and everything.
Website redesign stuff as well.
If I were you, I would 100% double down on the mega category of feel good productivity and make everything fall under that. Yep. And literally, I honestly think no one has really executed this better from a categorical lens as Ryan Holiday with Stoicism. Yeah. And that's your whole goal, is just Ali Abdaal comes second, feel good productivity comes first. How do I build a suite of products and a library of IP and books that falls within that category?
So if I did a book called something like, I don't know, How to Actually Enjoy Your Work or something like that, how to actually enjoy your 9 to 5 or something, that's almost like extending the category of feel good productivity.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah, you can do that. The risk that you run with that is it's very similar to that book, the book that you just wrote. Fine. And so same with our pricing discussion where people put prices together. Yeah. Most people, if you look at Mark Manson's actually a good example of this. His second book and his first book are actually very similar. Yes. And so when you read the first book, you're sort of I don't know that I need to read the second book because it's so, Sure. And so when you're thinking about the library, your goal is how do I create something that is farther away from my first book from a concept perspective?
Yes, good point. Yeah, so Feel Good Discipline would be one of them where people can appreciate that those two are actually different books. Mm-hmm. But they're related enough that okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. or like feel good conflict resolution. You're like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Like conflict resolution usually feels stressful.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? So you have, I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than the irony of feel good productivity is that you've niched down without niching down, because it's still so wide.
Yeah.
So you've found something. That's the magic, is like finding something specific that actually doesn't rule a lot of people out, but immediately forces people to go, well, do I want slow productivity or do I want feel good productivity?
Yeah. Yeah, part of the reason to have blocks on the book cover was also that, like, I could imagine a world where all of our books had like blocks, like colored blocks in different configurations. And so I was sort of like mocking up feel good parenting being like the blocks are a bit higgledy-piggledy to look like kind of a toddler's blocks.
Oh, that's cool.
Or like feel good fitness is like the blocks are like a barbell or something to that effect.
Oh,
it would just be cute if like the whole thing could have like the whole library could have a sort of video animated reconfiguration of the blocks that would result in the things. But that's going really no one cares.
So something else to think about too is if you wanted to like experiment with that library, you could not deploy a ton of resource, and you could write smaller ebooks or even print books on Amazon within those different verticals, and then look for the one that outperforms the rest, and then go to the publisher and go, I'm ready to do round 2. I've written 5 different feel-good category ebooks.
Yeah.
This is the one that's clearly working. Let's do a book deal that's even bigger than the first one, but is basically that book expanded. Because Atomic Habits is just blog post expanded. Mark Manson's book was a blog post expanded, right? So they are interested in the expansion of ideas once they're proven successful.
And I guess kind of riffing on that, maybe it would also be useful to just do a video talk called Feel Good Discipline. With
Exactly.
Like the subtitle of like how to blah, 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 whatever the subtitle would be, and see how that does.
I mean, so a book I'm working on right now is based on our first episode together, because the title, I forget even the title, but it was like five ways to make $1 million as a writer or something.
That kind of thing.
And that, because it performed so well, sent me down the rabbit hole of, or 5 paths to make something like that. And I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting to do a book around the different career paths and how each one, pros and cons of making $1 million as a writer. Like, how do you make $1 million as a literary writer?
Yeah, that's cool.
And so, you should take all of these ideas and just run it through the lean writing method, create a video on it, create Twitter threads on it.
Feel Good Discipline. That's a good
Starting to percolate.
Yeah. Like that could be quite a fun book to write.
The best part is I only take 10%.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. What about hybrid publishing?
I hate it. Yeah. It's a hedge. I think anything in life, almost anything in life that is a hedge means...
Except hybrid agencies.
Except hybrid agencies, exactly. Hybrid agencies, the word is in a different context, but hybrid publishing is like, you don't know whether you're playing the New York Times game or the self-publishing game. You've picked a weird middle ground.
How many copies has Art and Business of online writing sold?
I don't know how many.
Or like how much have you made from it?
Number of copies I don't know, but I've probably made like $250,000 from it. Something like that.
Self-published?
Yeah.
So you just get royalty checks every month or every quarter? Or how does it work?
Every month on Amazon.
Nice.
And I sell like 20% of them through my own website. So I'm getting 100% of that sale.
Oh, you just like through like a Gumroad store or something like that.
Yeah. And what's wild is when I wrote that book in 2020, I had been writing online for a while, didn't have a huge audience. The advance I would have gotten for that book probably would have been about $20,000.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have talked my way into getting like a $50,000 advance just because of where I was. But if I had done that to date, I probably wouldn't have made much more than $50,000. So it's interesting too to look at that decision in hindsight and go, not only have I completely eclipsed whatever that advance would be, but I'm making way more.
And if you sell on Amazon, so like how much do you personally take home from each sale? Like, do you have a sense of what those numbers are?
I've read this so many times and I always forget the exact numbers, but it's something like, depending on ebook or print book, it's somewhere in the ballpark of, I think print is like, it's one of the two. It's either print is 30% and ebook is 70%, or it's flipped.
Okay.
But it's a percentage of the sale.
Okay, fine. And have you got an audiobook for it?
No. And that was one of the biggest missed opportunities. I've just been so busy and we've been building our companies, but that's on my to-do list for this year.
Nice.
If I had done the audiobook with it, I probably would have made another 250, which is really frustrating to look at in hindsight, but you know.
Hey-ho.
Okay, golden question. Maybe this is a good one to end on. Was writing this book daunting, and how did you overcome the constant inner critic? Did you have an inner critic? What was that like?
Oh yeah, all the way through. I thought I'd gotten over imposter syndrome and stuff because I'd been doing YouTube videos for so long and all that. But as soon as it came to writing a book, there was something about that
Why do you think
really
that
scary.
is? Why is that so daunting for people?
I think for me, a big part of it was that when you write a book, you're really putting out a thing into the world saying that, like, I think what I have to share is sufficiently valuable. Whereas when you put out YouTube videos, like, I mean, everyone in the dog's putting out YouTube videos. Like, it's not like a major, you aren't sticking your neck out that far by putting out a YouTube video. I mean, still, people think that putting out a YouTube video is sticking their neck out. But putting out a book where, in particular, strangers can then review it on Amazon and Goodreads publicly and can actually share what they think about it.
Even though people comment ridiculous things on YouTube videos?
Yeah, but it's a YouTube video. Like, no one, like, it doesn't have a rating. YouTube videos don't have a rating system. I think part of it was the fear of, what if people don't like this? And then that will be public knowledge that it is shit. And that is really scary. Which was a big part of, like, second guessing myself. Also, the books I read, I was sort of comparing my shitty first drafts to, like, Dan Pink's final draft and thinking, oh shit, it's so good. How's it so good? And yeah, when I got the book deal, I was 26, and I kind of thought, like, who the fuck is going to listen to a 26-year-old dude, like, talk about productivity?
Oh, wow.
Like,
I didn't realize it was 4 years ago. Wow.
Yeah, and so, it was a lot of these sorts of things, and, like, I've never really done anything interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was a doctor, but, like, big whoop, so was everyone I know. You know, that kind of thing. And, like, yeah, I grew a YouTube channel, but, like, you know, it's not like I'm Mr. Beast levels of YouTube channel. And yeah, I grew a business, but, like, you know, it's only a 7-figure business. You know, that sort of thing. It was all sorts of, like, my credential is only X, and there are 5 million or more people in the world who also have credential X. So why is it interesting? Like, who am I to write this book?
So then, how'd you get it over the finish line? Did you, like, hire a coach or anybody to help you?
Yeah, so I had a writing coach initially in the early stages, and then had a external editor outside of the publishing house about halfway through the process. She was great, Rachel. She sort of project managed the whole thing. And a lot of my conversations with Rachel and with Kate, my agent, were, like, emotional supporty type conversations where they were like, don't worry, everyone goes through this. Yep, it's fine. You don't have to read the reviews. Also, the book is genuinely good, so don't worry about it. Like, we tell you if we thought it was shit. Like, don't worry. We're all professionals. We've done this before. The publishers have done this before. We know when a book is bad. We're not going to let this be bad. Don't worry. A lot of that.
So that is a big value.
Yeah.
You know, I understand then why a lot of people want that hand holding.
Yeah.
You know,
but you can hire that out externally.
You also can hire that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then a big part of it was, along the way, I had to remember to take my own advice. And whenever I would really struggle with the book, it's because I'd flipped into treating it with too much seriousness. Just taking it too sincerely. Just taking it too seriously and thinking this is a big, heavy thing. And it was the times where I really embodied this idea of, like, what would this actually look like if it were fun? Like, what does the feel-good version of this look like?
Drinking the Kool-Aid. Exactly.
Where I would be like, you know what, this is literally the shit I'm writing about. And, like, okay, let me actually, okay, cool. So let me, you know, get a walking pad for my desk. Let me kind of do this, like, dictate this bit while I'm going for a walk around Hyde Park. Let me do this bit in the coffee shop. Let me have, like, a co-working party with friends. Let's take the whole team to a team retreat in Wales and get a big-ass Airbnb where the goal is no one's allowed to do any work. And so the team's all hanging out, and I'm just sitting there grinding on this book because I have to get a chapter out every day. It was things like that made the process more enjoyable. That ultimately helped to get over the finish line.
What of those things are you planning on doing this next time?
A big part of it is the intense sprints. I found that the most productive times in the book journey were where I had, like, a whole week or two to just think about the book. The whole stuff around, like, well, if you write for 3 hours a day, then that's as much as anyone can do in any reasonable length of time. And then that, if you write 1,000 words a day, that extended out compounds, blah, blah, blah. I didn't really make much progress because the startup costs of rebooting it back into my RAM and Like trying
That's
to
a great
figure
point.
out like where was I, and like, okay, let me bring up all those tabs on freaking Zotero and Scrivener that I have. It's like, well, what was that study again? By that time, it's like, it's time for my coffee and poo, and then it's like, I can't be asked to write anymore. But on the weeks where I just had nothing to do other than write the book, or on the whole days where I had nothing to do other than write the book, yeah, I screw around a bit in the morning. I go to the toilet 3 times, but I still have another 7 hours to write the book.
Yeah.
So
that's, I'm actually really glad you said that, because one of the things I beat myself up about most often is, because I'm running a company, and there's a lot to do. And I will get very down on myself being like, you didn't do your personal writing today.
Yeah.
I did 8 hours of work writing, but I didn't get my personal writing. And I actually think, yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you just need to hear it from someone else. But I think you're totally right. It'd be better to just immerse yourself for a week rather than try and do 30 minutes a day, which is so interesting because that's counter to everything we talk about in Ship 30. But I think, especially when you're juggling so many different types of pursuits or projects, like immersion is almost always better.
Yeah, I think so. What was I going to say? It's like, I've also realized this is a big part of what Cal talks about in slow productivity. Like, the more projects you have going on in parallel, the more the administrative overhead costs of each project add up. And so actually just carving out a whole day to just do one thing means that you don't have to deal with all of the other bullshit that would otherwise be associated with running a business and building a team and stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm very bullish on these short sprints of intensity to just turn it into a party. Like, go to I see why writers go to a cabin in the woods for like a week at a time or a month at a time. I'm like, you know what? That would actually be kind of fun.
Maybe I'm going to come full circle, because I always trash the cabin in the woods and the chapeau and the corncob pipe. Maybe I'll come full circle and go, you know what? Yeah. There is a place for a cabin in the woods after all.
Yeah. I think editing is nice to do in like small drips and drabs. Because editing, it's like the goal is to see it with fresh eyes and to like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
But especially the first draft, the writing itself. And then and also like the really meaty edits where it's like, okay, I need to immerse myself in this for a whole like week just to see the whole picture and then be able to slot things around.
Yeah, you have to hold all that stuff in your head.
Yeah.
Well, congrats again on New York Times bestseller.
Thank you.
Very much enjoying the book. But you also sort of talked me out of reading the second half. So we'll see if I finish it.
Although a lot of people have said the chapter 9, the final chapter, is their favorite one. So
really?
Maybe
okay.
We'll skip ahead.
It's great. And if you watch to the end of this video, we'll give you a bonus.
Yeah. Do you have any bonuses this time around for people who are watching to the end of this episode?
They know where to find us.
Yeah.
We're always giving away free stuff. Not too worried about it.
And
I'm just happy I got to see you here in London.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Nice. GG.